We acknowledge that Tri-Cities Community Television operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. We thank the Coquitlam who continue to live on these lands and care for them along with the waters and all that is above and below.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our town hall event. My name is Ben Craig. And yes, we are nonpartisan, the Maillardville Residents Association and the town hall group. We don't want to take a side on any of these issues. Not to say we don't discourage you from taking your own sides, our speakers. In fact, we'd encourage you to do that. Speak your mind. We're all looking forward to that. Let's move on to our next speaker. We're honored to have John Carpay here. John is the founder and president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. John was born in the Netherlands and grew up here in British Columbia, fluent in English, French, and Dutch. John served the Canadian Taxpayers Federation as Alberta Director from 2001 to 2005, advocating for lower taxes, less waste, and accountable government. John was called to the bar in 1999, and since then he's been an advocate for freedom and the rule of law in constitutional cases across Canada. John's here tonight to talk about Bill C-8, Bill C-22, among other issues, hopefully not in Dutch. Let's welcome John Carpay.
Thank you so much. Et bonsoir aux francophones qui sont ici ce soir, peut-être. Oui, Maillardville, je vois des sourires, puis OK. I am, I flew in from Calgary this morning, and I always feel like I'm coming home when I come back to BC, because I am coming home, because I lived in Kitimat for grades 3, 4, 5, 6, and then Williams Lake for grades 7 through 12, and did a year at UBC, and my mom lived in Vernon for 38 years, and so always happy to, and I was a candidate in the federal election in 1993. I was only 26. I ran for Parliament for the Reform Party in Burnaby, and so I lived here in Vancouver for about 4.5 years as well. So just really delighted to be back home, to be here with you this evening. And I'm going to cover two topics tonight. One that was referred to with the Bill C-22, and I'll touch on some of the other threats to privacy and the threat of the surveillance state. And then I'll talk a little bit, not too much, about some of the land use and Aboriginal issues, and share some thoughts on that. And before I dive into that, a little bit of background information about the Justice Center. We are a national charity, nonprofit. We defend freedom in Canada. We have a team of lawyers all over Canada. One of them, is Paul Jaffe here? Where's Paul? Is Paul not speaking tonight?
He is coming, yes. He is in the building, but not right now.
Okay. Yeah. Paul Jaffe is one of our, one of the lawyers on, there he is. Hey, Paul. I was just talking about the Justice Center and saying we have lawyers all over Canada, and then it's like, Paul Jaffe, and then it's like, well, he's in the building. But here's Paul. Big round of applause for Paul Jaffe. Paul Jaffe does fantastic work defending your charter rights and freedoms. So you have lawyers like Paul Jaffe in Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, all over Canada. We're involved in dozens of court cases to defend the fundamental freedoms of expression, conscience, religion, association, peaceful assembly. We were very active speaking up for charter rights and freedoms during the lockdowns and vaccine passports. Thank you. We were the only civil liberties group in Canada that called for an end to lockdowns. We said they're causing more harm than good, and they're not demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. And so our membership grew a lot over those years, because other civil liberties groups were saying, well, you know, they're not really for lockdowns, but not really against them either. So we fought the good fight. I have a book, Corrupted by Fear, that goes through some of the court rulings, which were atrocious because we have judges that wrote the media narrative into their, it's called Corrupted by Fear. And so this was the problem during lockdowns. It was the Canadian people, the media, the legal establishment, the law societies, the courts, the judges, everybody corrupted by fear. And so the judges wrote the media narrative into their court rulings, and in many cases they disregarded, they ignored, or at least didn't pay close attention to the evidence that was placed before them in court. We produce reports like Death by 1,000 Clicks, The Rise of Internet Censorship and Control in Canada. I don't have copies of these, but they're with me, but they're on our website. And more recently, Privacy Collapse, Canada's expanding surveillance state. So I'll dive right into that topic. Privacy is a shield of a free people. A government that can do everything for you is a government that can take everything from you. A government that knows everything about you is a government that can inflict a great deal of harm upon you. Knowledge is power. Yeah, this is a bad thing, but yeah, knowledge is power. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. What do you think a government's going to do when it knows everything about you, but centralized in one place? I mean, currently governments know a lot about us, but at least it's separated. You know, you got the motor vehicles branch, and so they've got your driver's license and your home address, but that's separate from the medical records, and that's separate maybe from if you got speeding tickets, which is separate from whether you've got, you know, criminal code convictions, which is separate from. So governments have a lot of information, but at least there's an appropriate separation. If all of that gets centralized, we end up with social credit system in China that you've all heard about. We're not talking about the social credit party that ran BC for a number of decades, but this is where if you criticize the government on Facebook, next thing you know, you can't get onto a train or a plane or a bus. And the technology is there. We can have that surveillance state in Canada. We got a small taste of it during the vaccine passports. Here you got personal, private, confidential medical information that you've got to flash on a QR code to a total stranger who's going to tell you whether you're a first-class citizen or a second-class citizen. And yes, you can fly on an airplane. No, you can't. Yes, you can go into a restaurant. No, you can't. So we got a taste of that. So the technology's there. So what's happening right now is that the federal government is putting in place the building blocks for this surveillance state, step by step. So we have Bill C-11, the Online Streaming Act, came into force in 2023, gave the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission legal authority over the internet. And then we have Bill C-18, the Online News Act, which has acted as kind of a censorship, denial of access. You can no longer share news stories on Facebook because the federal government passed the Online News Act to force the big companies to pay for it. It backfired. Meta said, we're not paying, and now a lot of media outlets actually get fewer viewers now than they did 3 years ago. It's completely backfired. Then we have Bill C-2, the Strong Borders Act, should be called the Strong Surveillance Act, would give government officials, not just police, expanded authority for warrantless access to private information. The warrant has served for centuries as a very effective tool to find a happy middle path between, on the one hand, respecting our privacy rights and our private property rights, and also allowing law enforcement to do their job and to catch criminals and prosecute criminals and punish the guilty. And this fine balancing act has been achieved through the warrant. So if the police have reasonable and probable grounds that, let's say somebody, Mark Smith, apologies to any Mark Smiths in the room, but they think that Mark Smith is running a child prostitution ring or selling child pornography or involved in terrorism, whatever. If they have reasonable and probable grounds, the police can go to court and say, we want a court order to allow us to bust into his home unannounced and seize his computer and arrest him and go through his stuff. And so they have to provide an affidavit to the court on which they set out their grounds. They can be cross-examined on the affidavit. So there's kind of a bit of pressure there that, you should be telling the truth anyways, but especially when you're swearing to an affidavit that you could get cross-examined on. And this was a happy medium. So the starting point is we have our property rights, we have our privacy rights, police are not allowed to come into our homes, and then there can be this exception for police through a warrant. This legislation that's coming down now with Bill C2, Bill C8, Bill C22 is chipping away at this warrant process. And in my 10-15 minutes, this is like a 3-hour presentation, could be, but check out these reports on our website, www.jccf.ca. This outlines in layman's terms what these bills are about, and there's an executive summary as well. If you don't want to read through the 20 pages, you've got a 1.5-page executive summary. So Bill C8, Cybersecurity Act, would give federal cabinet ministers the power to kick Canadians off the internet. You suddenly find yourself, you can't bank, you can't use email, because the government's ordered your internet service provider to no longer provide services to you. That's Bill C8. Then we had the Online Harms Act, which fortunately died with the federal election in 2025, but the federal government threatens to bring it back. This piece of legislation shows the manipulation, right? Oh, we got to protect the children from online harm. It's already illegal to harm children online. Child porn is illegal. Revenge porn is illegal. Uttering threats online is illegal. Intimidation, illegal. There's a whole bunch of criminal law provisions that prohibit all manner of online crime. But this is what the government does. They try, rather than really improving law enforcement, they come out with a new bill, Bill C9, protecting access to places of worship. It's already a crime if you physically obstruct somebody from going into a church, temple, synagogue, mosque. Physical obstruction is a criminal code offense already. Right? But they come out, we got this new legislation to protect houses of worship. So, briefly, I see the ladies helping with the time. We've got quite the challenge with the Musqueam Agreement and with Aboriginal related issues, and it's very sad because this is chipping away at the unity and the reconciliation that I think everybody wants. In a multiracial, multicultural, multi-ethnic country like Canada, the only way that you can have social trust and harmony and reconciliation is by adhering to a very simple principle: equal rights for all, special privileges for none. And that's... What we're fighting is neo-Marxism, which is this ideology that we need to focus on what group we belong to, and we need to fight the other groups who are enemies. And it's a very destructive doctrine. The old Marxism was capitalist versus worker, or bourgeoisie versus proletariat. And so that philosophy was, it doesn't really matter. How many people have seen the bumper sticker, "Be the change you want to see in the world"? Right? The Marxism is the polar opposite of that. Marxism is, it's not important for individuals to become more courageous, more loving, more kind, more honest. It's not about that. It's all about class warfare. And so the proletariat, the workers, have to vanquish the capitalists. Now, after several decades, a lot of people weren't buying it, and so the old Marxism, you don't hear about it too much. Now we have a new Marxism, but it's the same thing. It's groups, group warfare. And so society is in this perpetual state of war, and it's men versus women, straight people versus gay people, light-skinned versus dark-skinned, etc. And you've got your equity cards, and you got to hate each other, and you got to figure out what group you belong to, and it's very divisive. I mean, there's a reality that we do have different religions, we have different skin colors, we have different, there's all kinds of differences. That's reality. If we want to be united, we need to focus on our common humanity, that we are all created in the image of God, and that is the basis. And if we focus first on our humanity secondarily on racial or sex or gender differences, then we can have the unity and harmony that we want. So, in closing, I'll say the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And you here tonight, you're not doing nothing. And as long as those of us in this room and outside of this room, people who love truth and justice and freedom, as long as we keep on fighting, keep on being engaged in the democratic process, keep on supporting good organizations, then the tyrants are not going to win, and we're going to regain all the freedoms that we've lost in the last few years. And in closing, I'm going to circulate this clipboard. This is for our newsletter. We send it out only once or twice a month. So if you put your name and email address, and the postal code is there just for notification for events. So if I'm speaking somewhere or one of our staff lawyers is speaking, then we've got your postal code. We don't need your address. So I'll circulate this if you'd like our newsletter and information at the back. And again, thanks so much for inviting me to be with you this evening. It's a great honor. Thank you.